Have you ever looked at someone rushing through life and wondered what invisible battles they were fighting? Soft sigh. Most people passed Emily without a second glance. To them, she was just another woman in a cleaning uniform. They never saw the quiet courage hidden behind her exhausted smile. At just 32, Emily carried responsibilities that would have broken many people. Every sunrise began with getting her 8-year-old son, Jake, ready for school before helping little Sophie, whose colorful drawings covered the apartment walls, find her favorite crayons. Those tiny moments of laughter were the brightest parts of her day, because everything else was a race against time. When the children left for school, Emily hurried to an elegant downtown hotel where she cleaned luxurious rooms she could never imagine living in. Every polished mirror reminded her of the distance between her life and the guests who barely noticed she existed. Yet she never complained. After returning home to cook dinner, help with homework, and read bedtime stories, she kissed her children goodnight, only to leave again for another cleaning job that stretched deep into the night. Some evenings she quietly skipped dinner so Jake and Sophie would never know there wasn't enough food for everyone. Still, she whispered the same promise to herself every night. One day, my children will have the life I never did. She had no idea that a single rainy evening was about to test that promise in ways she never imagined. Rain hammered against the hotel windows that night, turning the city lights into blurred streaks of gold. Emily pushed her cleaning cart through the silent hallway, her legs aching after another endless shift. Only one luxury suite remained before she could finally hurry home. Deep breath. She reminded herself that Jake and Sophie would be asleep by now, waiting for her goodnight kiss when she returned. The suite looked empty, so she quietly began cleaning. Just as she reached the bathroom, the door suddenly opened. Emily froze. A tall man stepped inside, loosening the tie around his neck as if the weight of the day had become unbearable. His expensive suit suggested success, but his tired eyes told a different story. He looked surprised to find someone there, then offered an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't realize the room was being cleaned." Emily nodded politely, eager to disappear into her work. Wealthy guests rarely noticed people like her, and she preferred it that way. But instead of leaving, the man wandered to the rain-covered window and stared into the darkness. "It's strange," he murmured. "Sometimes you can have everything people dream about and still feel completely alone." His words caught Emily off guard. She knew loneliness all too well, even if hers came from empty cupboards and sleepless nights instead of luxury. For several quiet moments, neither of them spoke. Then he turned toward her with a faint, weary smile. "I'm Mark." "Emily," she answered. Something changed in the silence that followed. Mark noticed the kindness in her eyes, a kindness he hadn't seen in the polished world he lived in. Emily, meanwhile, sensed that behind his expensive clothes was someone carrying wounds money could never heal. She finished her work as quickly as she could, convinced that this brief conversation would soon be forgotten. But as Emily pushed her cart down the hallway, she couldn't shake the feeling that the stranger standing alone by the rain-soaked window was somehow about to become part of her life, and neither of them knew the storm had only just begun. For the next few days, Emily told herself that the strange encounter was over. She had too many bills to pay and too many responsibilities to carry. Thinking about a wealthy hotel guest felt like a distraction she couldn't afford. Yet every time she walked through those quiet hallways, she found herself glancing toward the elevators, wondering if she might see him again. Then one afternoon, she heard a familiar voice. "Emily." She looked up, startled. Mark stood a few feet away, dressed as sharply as ever. But this time there was something warmer in his expression. "I was hoping I'd find you," he admitted. "Would you let me buy you a cup of coffee? Just a conversation. Nothing more." Emily's heart raced. Long pause. She wanted to say yes, but fear answered first. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "People will misunderstand. I have children waiting for me. I can't." Mark respected her answer, but he didn't forget her. A few evenings later, after finishing one of her late-night cleaning jobs, Emily discovered a bouquet of bright yellow roses waiting near the doorway. There was no note, yet somehow she already knew who had sent them. It had been years since anyone had given her flowers. For the first time in a long while, she smiled all the way home. Soon, their paths crossed more often. Sometimes they spoke for only a few minutes in an empty corridor. Other times they shared coffee from paper cups in a quiet staff lounge while the rest of the hotel buzzed around them. They talked about ordinary things, Jake's love of football, Sophie's endless imagination, and Mark's exhausting business life. Emily noticed something unusual. Mark never treated her like she was invisible. He listened carefully, remembered little details, and laughed at stories about her children as if they truly mattered. For Mark, those brief conversations became the only peaceful moments in his busy life. For Emily, they became a quiet reminder that someone finally saw her as more than a cleaner. But not everyone would see their growing friendship with kindness. Somewhere beyond the hotel walls, someone had already started asking uncomfortable questions, and the answers would soon threaten everything Emily had worked so hard to protect. Happiness can be fragile. Sometimes it takes only one rumor to destroy a life built on years of sacrifice. Emily never noticed the curious glances at first. A few hotel employees stopped smiling when she passed. Conversations ended the moment she entered the room. Soft sigh. She told herself she was imagining it. She wasn't. Mark had been engaged for months to Clara, a woman who came from one of the city's wealthiest families. Their relationship had looked perfect from the outside, but behind closed doors, it had already begun to fall apart long before Emily entered the picture. When Clara heard whispers that Mark had been spending time with a hotel cleaner, anger quickly turned into revenge. She didn't confront Emily directly. Instead, she chose something far more damaging. She told friends that Emily had deliberately chased a wealthy man. Before long, those stories spread through social circles that employed many domestic workers. People repeated the gossip without asking a single question. Emily's kindness disappeared behind cruel labels she had never earned. The consequences arrived faster than she expected. One afternoon, a longtime client called her into the living room instead of handing her the usual cleaning supplies. "I'm sorry," the woman said coldly. "I've heard enough. I don't think you're the kind of person I want in my home anymore." Emily tried to explain, but every word seemed to disappear before it reached anyone's heart. She walked home carrying her cleaning bag with trembling hands. That job had paid for groceries and school supplies. Without it, the budget she already stretched to its limit simply wouldn't survive. That evening, she smiled through dinner so Jake and Sophie wouldn't worry. She listened to Jake excitedly talk about football practice and admired another colorful picture Sophie had drawn. Only after both children had fallen asleep did Emily quietly sit alone on the kitchen floor, holding back tears. She covered her face and finally allowed herself to cry. Not because people hated her, not because she had lost a job, but because she feared she might soon lose the future she had promised her children. And while Emily struggled to hold her family together, Mark was about to make a decision that would change both of their lives forever. When Mark finally found Emily, there was no hesitation left in his voice. "I ended my engagement," he said quietly. "Not because of you, but because I had been living a life that no longer felt honest." Emily stood frozen. Then came the words she never expected to hear. "I love you, Emily. And I love the way you fight for your children. Will you marry me?" For a brief moment, the future she had dreamed about seemed within reach. Mark promised a warm home, good schools for Jake and Sophie, and a life where she would never have to work herself to exhaustion again. But before Emily could answer, life tested her once more. Both Jake and Sophie became seriously ill with high fevers. The doctor's visit, medicine, and missed work pushed her to the edge. Mark immediately offered to pay every expense. "Please," he begged. "Let me help." Emily closed her eyes. Long pause. Every part of her wanted to say yes, for her children, for herself, for the chance to finally rest. Yet something deep inside refused. "If I accept because I'm desperate," she whispered, "I'll spend the rest of my life wondering whether I chose love or survival." Days later, she met Mark in a quiet park. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the man who had treated her with more kindness than anyone else had in years. I do love you, she admitted softly, but I can't marry you. The words shattered both of their hearts. Emily returned home and opened a small tin box hidden inside her kitchen cabinet. It held every coin and every small bill she had managed to save after years of working two exhausting jobs. It wasn't much, but it was enough to take one frightening step. Instead of accepting rescue, she invested every dollar into a tiny cleaning company of her own. She printed simple business cards, bought professional supplies, and knocked on doors herself. The first months were brutal, but little by little, customers returned, not because they pitied her, but because she earned their trust. Mark never tried to change her mind again. Instead, he became one of her very first clients, hiring her company to clean his office buildings. He supported her dream without taking away her independence. Years later, Emily watched Jake and Sophie leave for school with bright smiles and hopeful hearts. Life wasn't perfect. She still worked hard. She still faced challenges. But every success belonged to her. Gentle smile. Emily realized that the greatest gift she could ever give her children wasn't a wealthy husband or an easy life. It was the example that dignity, courage, and perseverance could build a future no rumor, no hardship, and no amount of money could ever replace. As the morning sun filled their small apartment, Emily took her children's hands and stepped forward with confidence. This time, she wasn't waiting for someone to save her. She had already become the hero her family needed.